Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi here bringing you all another Market Watch episode. So right now the format is extremely diverse, with decks like Dragon Link, Immovable Knights, Zodiacs, and Virtual World all seeing some sort of competitive success. With that, we are seeing new techs and card trends popping up all over the place, which of course brings about a ton of changes all over the market. So in today's Market Watch, we are going to take a look at some of the trends that we've seen over the past week or so as the meta has taken shape, and discuss how these changes will affect what cards you guys should be looking to buy, sell, or trade. Let's get started. Kicking things off, let's talk about AA-Zeus, the new Xyz monster right out of Phantom Rage. So for the most part, Phantom Rage is looking like a pretty underwhelming set, with only two really big money cards in it in Zeus and Alpha, and even then each of them is down under the $50 mark. However, I definitely think that Zeus is a card that has a ton of upwards potential that I would definitely be keeping an eye on moving forward. As I'm sure you all know, Zeus has almost single-handedly allowed Zodiacs to become a meta-relevant deck once again, with a board wipe effect that isn't a once per turn that also sends instead of destroying cards. However, the card has also started to pop up in other strategies, such as the Virtual World deck. The card is so powerful and can bring about such a huge shift in momentum that decks are actually dedicating multiple extra deck slots to be able to run this card with adequate materials. That being said, I definitely think it's a strong enough card that we will be seeing the card adopted by more and more strategies, especially after the upcoming ban list phases out non-Xyz decks like Immovable Knights and Dragon Links in favor of ones that are more Xyz-centric, such as the Phantom Knights. The card has tanked in price since the set's release, as the card is now down at $45 a piece on TCG Player. However, I kind of see this as being the bottom out price for Zeus as such a strong, potentially meta-defining card that could definitely see an increase in play next format. Personally, I would be looking to pick up copies of this card at around $40 or so, because I could very easily see the card bouncing right back up to the $60 mark in the next couple of months. Obviously, because of the price tag, I wouldn't necessarily go out and invest in a ton of copies of this card, but it's definitely something that you'll want to own at least a copy or two of, just in case it does see that huge spike in price later on in the future. Next up, we have Ravenous Crocodragon Archetys, which is a level 9 synchro monster that is currently an extra deck staple for the Virtual World deck. It's a generic synchro monster that has two effects, allowing you to draw cards equal to the number of non-tuner monsters used to make it, and it also has a quick effect where you can discard two cards to pop a card on the field. It's typically the first effect that you're really using this card for, as the deck can very easily empty its hand onto the field or into the graveyard, so it's nice to be able to draw into additional hand traps or combo pieces for the following turn. Also, as a level 9 monster, you can use Crocodragon to go into True King of all Calamities, which can effectively win you the game. So before, Crocodragon was kind of a niche option that didn't see too much play. It came up as a tech option here and there, but was never really something that was gone into very consistently, and it was only worth $1 or $2. However, now that the card is seeing consistent play from one of the top decks of the format, we've already seen the card shoot up to the $4 to $5 price range for a single copy. If you're looking to play the Virtual World deck, it's definitely a card that you're going to need, and I'm going to recommend picking up this card fairly soon while it's still fairly cheap. Assuming that on the next ban list we see hits to a couple of other top decks this format, Virtual World could become even more popular than they already are, and we would therefore see a ton of people scrambling to pick up their copies of Crocodragon, which could very easily shoot this card up to being $8 to $10 a piece. If you can pick it up for around $3 in cash to $4 in trades right now, I think that this card makes a great hold for the next couple of months, since we also shouldn't expect to see it reprinted until the 2021 Megatons. So this one feels really random, but let's take a look at Aussa the Earth Charmer Immovable. This card is a rare out of Ignition Assault, and while I know that most of us probably overlooked this card whenever it was pulled before, this is now a $6 rare. I believe that at one point this card was actually $3 or so, but it saw some consistent sales that pushed its price up to the $6 mark. Now there are a couple of reasons for this increase in price. First, with the new Charmer structure deck coming out, none of the Charmer Link monsters were reprinted in there, so we are seeing a little bit of a bump up in their prices all across the board. The main reason, however, is that the card is actually seeing some niche usage in Zodiacs. You have to use an Earth monster to make this card, but it's actually possible to go into this by using any of your Zodiac monsters, as they are all Earth, so you could steal an opponent's monster with Triple Tactics talent and then link it off so that they don't get it back during the end phase, which would be otherwise hard to do because you place so many Zodiac monsters in your extra deck, Alternatively, in the Zodiac Mirror match, you can use this card to steal a monster out of your opponent's graveyard and then Ixi summon with it so that your opponent can't reattach or summon it back with Tiger Mortar or Chakanine. And then of course, it does have an effect that triggers if it's destroyed by battle or card effect while it's in your possession, allowing you to add an earth monster from your graveyard to your hand, so it can give Zodiacs a way to potentially have a follow-up play for the next turn. Of course, this price point does feel a little bit silly, as the card is just a rare and it's from a relatively recent set, but I believe that this card is actually the last set where we had rares, and with 20 rares per set and no unlimited printing of Ignition Assault, maybe the card is a bit harder to find than you're expecting. All in all, I don't know if this card is necessary in Zodiac, since despite its multiple potential applications, I feel like you are typically better off going into other things. Either way, I would expect this card to be similar to Hida and get that super rare OTS tournament pack printing relatively soon. Just be sure to dig this card out of your bulk and offload them if you have the chance to. Another kind of wild one here, we have the Phantom Knights of Ragged Gloves. Specifically, we're looking at the super rare version from OTS Tournament Pack 2. So of course, Phantom Knights were one of the main archetypes to receive support from Phantom Rage, getting a ton of new cards. This, combined with the unbanning of Rusty Bardiche and Seer and Graf both going to 2 on the most recent ban list, has been a pretty significant boost for the Burning Abyss Phantom Knight deck. Now, I would argue that the deck definitely isn't top tier at the moment, though maybe it's more of a tier 1.5 to tier 2 strategy. We've seen the deck do some pretty cool things, both as a pure deck and combined with other archetypes. However, I definitely think that people are also looking at Phantom Knights as maybe becoming a tier 1 strategy after the next ban list takes some of the stronger decks out of the format and people are just getting ready to bling out their decks. As a result, the super rare version of Ragged Gloves, which is the only holo printing of this card, basically doesn't exist on the market, with the cheapest copies being over $20 a piece. This is pretty insane, though since Boots, Cloak, and Fogblade all have multiple holo printings, it does kind of make sense that people would be after the holo version of this card to bling out the entire engine. For me personally, I wouldn't really be down to pay this much for gloves. It's kind of silly that you're paying almost as much for your copy of gloves as you are for a copy of Torn Scales. However, it's an older OTS holo, and despite being bought out a few days ago, we haven't seen it drop down in price as quickly as we normally would see other cards. Personally, I'd move whatever copies you're holding onto and just look at playing the commons, because if Phantom Knights really do become one of the top meta decks, we're probably going to see all of the cards, including gloves, get another holo print within the next couple of reprint sets. Either way, I'd still be looking to move your super rare copies of gloves, because it's only a matter of time before people dig up their copies and start listing them back onto the market, which will naturally drive the price back down. So this is one that I didn't really see coming, but MathMechs have started to pick up a little bit of attention as a relatively solid tier 2-ish strategy. Apparently, there are several high-rated players playing the deck on Dueling Book, and I think that the deck was featured on DB Grinder's channel recently as well. I don't really know too much about the deck itself, but I know that there is a ton of really cool Cyberse and Link monsters that all work together really well, like the cards that go together in the Code Talker deck over in the OCG. The MathMech deck here has some neat combos, but it can also OTK out of nowhere by going into Final Sigma, which kind of reminds me a lot of Utopia Double. Anyways, Pymathmech Alimbertian is a rank 4 monster that is a key card for the strategy that I believe is actually either run at 2 or 3. This card was pretty sought after on release because it has an effect that allows you to search for any spell or trap from your deck. If you Ixi summon it with 4 materials, this isn't the effect that you actually use in the deck. I believe you use the 2 material effect to search for a MathMech card instead. Obviously, the search any spell or trap never really panned out, and I haven't seen the card used anywhere outside of the MathMech deck at all, but it's cool and potentially really strong in theory if we ever get some sort of rank 4 centric deck. Anyways, the card was short printed back in Mystic Fighters, the same set that the Dragon Maids came out of, and has historically been around the $15 to $20 price range. Now, however, the card is all the way up at $25 a piece, with some people clearly looking at picking up the engine as maybe a fun deck to play in real life once events start back up again. The question here is whether or not we should expect to see Alimbertian reprinted anytime soon, and given how the math mech hasn't really been popular at all over the last year, I think it will be quite some time. Even though we did just see the Dragon Maids reprinted in Maximum Gold, this is one of those cards where if you want to play it, then you keep it, but if not, now is the perfect time to go ahead and move it, given the hype that it's seeing at the moment. Alright, so this is a card that we talked about not too long ago when it was under $1, but Dimension Shifter is now a $2, almost $3 card. So obviously this was kind of the forgotten card compared to Dark Ruler No More and Nibiru, but Dimension Shifter is picking up a lot of attention now as a hand trap. Initially, people were looking at it as a hand trap of choice for the Mutant deck, as they are okay with banishing cards, but a lot of other decks didn't want their cards to be banished. Now, despite Mutants not really seeing any play at all, Dimension Shifter is being looked at because it's a really strong card against a lot of top tier decks. In Virtual World, they need to get cards into the graveyard because they need to banish the spells and traps from the grave in order to activate their effects. In Zodiacs, you can't abuse Tiger Mortar and Chakanine if your materials are banished, and you're at risk of losing access to your one copy of Trident. In Dragon Link, certain cards such as World Legacy Guard Dragon and Black Metal Dragon become dead, and then against different Halki Fibrax combo decks, your opponent can't recur tuners with Martial Metal Marcher. Now that being said, the card's own text is its biggest problem, as you can really only use it if you're on turn 0 and have no cards in your graveyard. Hopefully you guys have your set that you picked up for maybe $1 or so each. I still think that the card is worth holding on to so that you have the option of playing it if you want to. However, if you are holding on to multiple copies, I think that now is definitely the time to dump them, because I seriously question just how high this card's price can actually get. Now, I am 100% sure that there are tons of people sitting on hundreds of copies of this card because the 2019 Megatins were one of the best products of all time, and they're just waiting for a small price bump like this before listing off their tons of quantities, which is only going to drive the prices down as the competition increases. This card is never going to see the same widespread use as Nibiru or Dark Ruler No More, and people are going to choose not to play it in favor of more consistent hand traps. So I would definitely be looking at offloading your extra copies while the hype for the card has built up a little bit. So this is one that we've known about for a while. I just wanted to note the continued increase in price. Obviously, with Eldritch being reprinted in Maximum Gold, the whole Eldritch engine is much more affordable than it was before. In fact, I think the gold rare copies of Eldritch are under $10 each at the moment, which is kind of insane. However, this has driven the price up of a lot of other Eldritch cards, as people have to pick up the remaining pieces of the engine to play alongside it. Of course, there are a ton of things that are worth noting, as cards like Golden Land Forever, Elixir of Scarlet Sanguine, and Conquistador of the Golden Land are all at $2 to $3 each. However, the biggest jump was in the price of Cursed Eldland, a super rare from the same set, which allows you to pay 800 life points to search for Eldritch or a Golden Land card. Now, when we looked at this card a few weeks ago, it was only around $10 or so, but it is now even higher up at the $15 mark, which I guess makes sense given that it is a 3 of in any Eldritch related strategy, regardless of how big the Eldritch package you're playing is. However, I definitely think that now we have even more people that are going to be looking at playing Eldritch into next format. Recently, Eldritch hasn't been such an overwhelming deck the way that it was on release, and I think it's fairly unlikely that we'll see it get hit on the upcoming ban list. In fact, I think that you could argue, given the recent reprint of Eldritch, it's pretty safe to say the deck will remain mostly untouched. At the same time, people have been looking at combining Eldritch with other different strategies, most notably the Zodiac and Dogmatica engines, all of which has come together to push Cursed Eldland up even higher in price. Now the question here is when exactly Cursed Eldland will be reprinted. The Eldritch reprint was extremely early, so it's hard to know exactly what a realistic timeline for Cursed Eldland's reprint would even look like. I actually think that given how popular Eldritch has been and is likely to continue to be moving forward, it could be an OTS tournament pack ulti, or maybe a common printing is a more realistic expectation. The answer here is that it's impossible to know because of how unprecedented the timing of the Eldritch reprint is, so it's entirely up to you and how badly you want to own and play the cards over the next little while. Alright, the last card to take a look at here is Constellar Ptolemy M7, a rank 6 Xyz monster. This card is an extra deck option that is apparently run by the Virtual World deck. The idea being that if you have 2 level 6s on board, you can go into this as spot removal for a monster on the field, or you can add a monster back to your hand from your graveyard, then overlay into Gaia Dragon, battle, and then go into Zeus. Overall, I don't know how necessary of an option this card is to have available in the extra deck. I feel like I've seen it in most lists, but I feel like it's just the best option if you're wanting to go into Zeus rather than True King of All Calamities, or at least a Shen Shen play. However, it is still a fairly good option, and the deck does have some room for utility slots in the extra deck because it can't play Link monsters at all. Now, as a result, we've seen two versions of M7 spike up in price, the DT and Secret Rares, each of which are up between the $25 to $30 mark at the moment. I think at one point they were much higher. I vaguely remember someone listing Secret Rare M7 at over the $100 mark. Honestly, I wouldn't spend anything close to this on a copy of M7. It is, however, worth noting that you can still get Duelist Saga Ultra Rare copies for about $2 each, which is much more affordable, and it's a holo printing that does look quite nice in my opinion. I'm definitely going to go and recommend selling the overpriced holo versions and then just playing the lower rarities, since I feel like it's a card that isn't going to be useful in too many places other than Virtual World anytime soon. And even then, it's just a situational usefulness, definitely another card to offload while its price is super inflated. Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been moving so quickly. It feels like just yesterday that we were waiting for Maximum Gold and Phantom Rage, and now we're waiting for Genesis, Impactors, and a whole new ban list within the next month or so. But I guess at the same time, it's really fun and it keeps things interesting with all of the movement. It's a lot to keep track of, but there is a lot of potential room for you to make some profits as well. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me. Also make sure you let me know in the comment section down below what else is going on with the market that maybe I missed, so I can cover it in a future video to keep you guys as informed as possible. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button for all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself here on the channel. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.